So Israel carries out one of its heaviest bombardments of the Strip since the conflict began, at the end of another day of deadly combat in the purgatory that is Gaza. As infernos light the skies, Israel pounds the territory from the air, killing dozens more. Hundreds of thousands of people are trapped in northern Gaza as Israeli troops advance. The UN has again called for an immediate ceasefire, with Arab leaders accusing Israel of committing war crimes and sinking the entire region into a sea of hatred that could define generations to come. In Israel itself, thousands have joined demonstrations organized by the families of the hostages held by Hamas, calling for them to be freed. In Jerusalem, police held back hundreds of protesters outside the residence of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who were calling for his resignation amid widespread anger at his government's handling of the crisis in Gaza. So, as the conflict gets more intense, we ask, is Israel trying to pursue twin aims, to destroy Hamas and to get the hostages released? And are these twin aims compatible, or is it a risky, perilous strategy? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line by the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, Michael Freeman. Mr. Freeman, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So 11 organizations, UN organizations, and 6 other humanitarian agencies have issued a rare joint call for an immediate ceasefire as the number of those killed in Gaza passes a grim milestone of 10,000, including more than 4,000 children, according to the statistics given by the health ministry in Gaza. What's your reaction to that? Is the Israeli government listening?
Good evening, Charles, and thanks for having me on the program again. Look, we are going to continue to pursue Hamas in order to make sure that they can't carry out further terror attacks on Israel and on Israelis. If Hamas want this to end, they can release all of the hostages and provide unconditionally surrender. That will end this immediately. This is a war between Israel and Hamas. It's not between Palestinians, it's purely between Hamas. And as you said, we've got dual aims, both to release the 240 hostages, women, children. The youngest is 10 months old, the oldest is over 80 years old, to release those hostages and to destroy Hamas. And we are working to do both of those things.
And when the Israelis targeted the Jabalia refugee camp, as well as hospitals or close to them, they knew, didn't they, that there would be significant civilian casualties as a result, and those, as a result of this, those caught up in that, to them, that didn't look cautious on the part of Israel at all.
To all of the residents in the northern Gaza Strip to move south, to provide safe zones, and many, many hundreds of thousands have done that. They have moved south. Hamas, unfortunately, are preventing many others from moving. Hamas, unfortunately, want to see civilian casualties. And when we carry out our strikes, we do everything that is reasonable to avoid civilian casualties. And the strikes that you talk about in the area of Jabalia was targeting a very, very, very senior Hamas terrorist. And it's been proven that when we targeted him, he was in an underground tunnel, and the underground tunnel system collapsed. And that caused most of the damage in that area in Jabalia. You mentioned hospitals. In the last 48 hours, we have produced evidence, absolutely firm evidence, that Hamas has put their command and control centers under the hospitals in Gaza. They are using the Shifa hospital as their main control center, their main headquarters. They are underneath there. The Indonesian hospital, we have shown, they are there, and on your screen now, we've shown the Sheikh Hamad hospital is being utilized. They have terror tunnels. They have all sorts of different things. They are firing from inside mosques. We saw today, we uncovered today a mosque that had 50 rocket launchers inside of it, a scout camp, a scout center that had rockets inside of it. We've shown children's playground with rockets inside of it. So we can see that Hamas are utterly abusing the Palestinian civilian population, hiding behind them in order to shoot and attack Israelis.
But I mean, Ambassador, you talked about urging or even demanding that people move south. But when people took that option, they realized that the south is also being attacked and therefore it's not entirely safe. And they wonder why they should move.
Well, the areas that we've told people to go, we've created safe zones. We are allowing in large amounts of humanitarian aid. Over 350 trucks have come in. There are more coming in tomorrow. There are more coming in every single day of humanitarian aid coming in through Egypt. And we've said to people, move south, and we've allocated very clear safe zones in the south part of Gaza where Israel is not attacking, where Israel is not carrying out any sorts of raids. It is Hamas that are abusing the population. And as you showed on your screen now, quite clearly, Hamas are hiding behind hospitals, hiding behind the civilian population. And, it's very difficult for us to understand this. But for Hamas, they are interested in civilian casualties. It's strange. We can't understand that. We live in a world where societies protect their civilians. Hamas do the exact opposite. The more civilian deaths, the more pressure that comes on so that they can stay there. And we can't allow Hamas to stay. We cannot allow a genocidal terror organization that is worse than Boko Haram, worse than ISIS, to be on our border. Hamas have made very clear if there's a ceasefire tomorrow, they will use that ceasefire to rearm in order to carry out the October 7th massacre again and again until Israel is annihilated. And no one would stand for that. We cannot have these people on our border.
But, I mean, by hitting civilians, Ambassador, and killing thousands of them, albeit hitting them cautiously, as you say, the risk is you turn people who previously weren't convinced by the merits of Hamas towards them because they want to resist what they feel are these crippling Israeli attacks.
Well, we've seen evidence in the last couple of days, and the BBC showed it, and other channels have showed it, of Gazan civilians when the camera's on them blaming Hamas, and then all of a sudden people covering their mouths and stopping them being able to do it. The Gazan civilians are suffering under Hamas terribly as well. And the Gazan civilians, if they're allowed to speak out, would tell you they want to get rid of Hamas. And I would also say to you that we should treat all of the numbers of casualties coming out of Gaza with a very large pinch of salt, with a large dose of salt. Hamas are the ones who are producing the numbers. They are the ones sending out. They are unverifiable numbers, and they are numbers that we know are highly, highly exaggerated. I have no doubt that civilians are being killed. And any civilian death from a Palestinian or an Israeli is a tragedy. I'm a father, I have young children, and when I see the pictures of young children or people being killed, it's a tragedy. And I want that to stop. But we can't stop until we have dismantled Hamas or until Hamas surrender. That we mustn't forget, there are also 240 Israeli hostages, children, babies, young girls, young boys who are being held by Hamas for no reason other than pure terror. And we have to get them back.
Well, you mentioned the hostages, Ambassador. Many Israelis, we've seen protests on the streets of Israel. Many Israelis are saying that the destruction of Hamas and trying to get the hostages released are incompatible. How risky and perilous a strategy is that?
Well, we believe the more pressure we put on Hamas, the more they feel the threat to them, the more likely they are to come to a deal. We've already rescued one hostage in a military operation last week or 2 weeks ago. And we believe that the more that we put pressure on them, the more that Hamas are likely to come to a deal. We know that Hamas don't want a deal at the moment. They're playing psychological warfare. They're playing cynical games with the families and with the Israeli population. But I can tell you that at every stage so far, when there have been offers, the Hamas are not interested in a deal whatsoever at the moment. And we are pursuing a tactic that is supported on the whole by Israelis and by the families. in order to put pressure on Hamas militarily so that they will come to the table in order to put together a deal, or they will release the hostages.
Well, I mean, some would argue that in spite of the sustained bombardment of Gaza and the fact that you've got ground troops there now, I mean, figures that we're seeing suggest that more than 10,000 people have been killed there, that Hamas, you're not killing Hamas, or at least not enough of them, to achieve your aims. I mean, they're still fighting and fighting very hard against you. And they're saying that 60 of they're saying that at least 60 of the hostages that you're trying to rescue have been killed because of your bombardment. I mean, that defeats part of your purpose, doesn't it?
Well, I don't believe those numbers. I don't believe those figures from Hamas. Hamas are playing a psychological warfare. They're playing a game. Today, they released pictures of some of the hostages to prove that they're alive. Their numbers change all the time. They keep saying how many they've got, how many they haven't got. So they are playing a game. I do not believe that those hostages have been killed. I do not believe those numbers whatsoever. And it's not true that we are not hitting Hamas. We are hitting Hamas hard. We know that thousands of Hamas terrorists have been killed. We have proof that thousands have been killed. We are engaging Hamas terrorists in both street battles. We are engaging them. We are attacking them in the tunnels underneath. You know, underneath Gaza, what you see above the ground is one Gaza. Underneath the ground is over 300 kilometers of tunnels that have been built by Hamas. And I asked the question, why has Hamas spent all of their money and all of their infrastructure building these tunnels? You know, Hamas fighters have got all the food they need, all the water they need, all the fuel they need, everything they need to be able to continue running their life underground, 300 kilometers. That are by estimations cost billions and billions and billions of dollars to build, because Hamas don't care about the population. They're not interested in the Palestinians within Gaza. They're only interested in themselves and in carrying out terror attacks against Israel.
On that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. Ambassador Michael Freeman is the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, and he was talking to me there on the line from Abuja. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.